couple of weeks ago, I heard an agitating, grating voice, which isn't unusual. I do work with middle schoolers. Turns out it was just my coworker. She exposited to me that the newest Hunger Games book, Sunrise on the Reaping, was coming out in March and we should totally reread the series. I scoffed at the idea, thinking I'm already way below my book goal for the year. There's simply. Hi, I'm Nick, and today we're going to discuss what I found interesting about the first three Hunger Games books. My goal was to pay special attention to a few things when rereading the series. Number one, Haymitch, our favorite alcoholic. Number two, what the actual Hunger Games look like, aka the layout of the 50th Hunger Games. And number three, the big one, what hints can I gather about the plot from the other three books in the series? So let's start with number one, Haymitch Abernathy. Where to begin with the guy? He's an alcoholic, which is implied to be the result of his PTSD from being in the Hunger Games. In the books, he functions as a mentor to Peeta and Katniss, occasionally pushing them in the correct direction before and during the games. In 74 years, District 12 has had exactly two victors. Only one is still alive, Haymitch Abernathy, a pudgy, middle-aged man. Full disclosure, I reread all of the books for this, and I only took intensive notes on that one chapter in Catching Fire where they talk about the 50th Quarter Quell. So much of this information about Haymitch is coming from the fan wiki. So if I say something wrong, you can blame them. It'll be just as productive as you arguing with the wall behind me, or you can just call me a silly goose in the comments and we'll both call it even. Haymitch was born on July 4th, reaping day of the 34th Hunger Games. Unfortunately, this makes him a fellow Cancer, so his alcoholism makes sense. Prior to the reaping, he had a girlfriend, Lenora Dove, a mother, and a younger brother named Sid. By all accounts, he was a conventionally attractive young man who had already mastered dried wit and sarcasm. Unfortunately, Haymitch made the Capitol look bad during his time in the arena. We'll pick up on that later, and as a result, his loved ones were killed by President Snow. So, the alcoholism makes sense. I would include details, but we're going to talk more about that in a minute or two. The majority of our information about the 50th Hunger Games comes from Catching Fire, in which Katniss and Peeta watch the second quarter quell. According to the book, the arena is the most beautiful place imaginable. The layout of the arena is implied to be split into three sections: a large flower meadow, a snow-capped mountain, and a forest. Katniss tells us that the incredible beauty is a ruse by the game makers to disguise the deadly mutts that are scattered across the arena. It becomes clear that almost everything in this pretty place is deadly poison. According to Katniss, 4 days in, the picturesque mountain erupts into a volcano that wipes out a dozen players. In the forest, where Haymitch spends the majority of his time, the squirrels there turn out to be carnivorous, and their butterfly stings bring agony, if not death. Even the water, which should be by all accounts be safe to drink, is deadly. The tributes are forced to collect rainwater in order to survive. Eventually, Haymitch teams up with Maisley, another tribute from District 12, and she saves him using a poisonous blowgun a few times. The two work together, and according to Katniss, just like Peeta and me, Haymitch and Maisley do much better together. Eventually, Haymitch uses a blowtorch from one of the dead tributes to carve a hole into a tightly knit hedge maze that surrounds the forest and discovers a cliff. This is where Maisley takes the time to call off their alliance. There's only 4 of us left. There's only 5 of us left. Might as well say goodbye now. Haymitch agrees, and shortly after, Haymitch is skewered through the neck by a flock of candy-colored birds. Similar to Katniss and Rue, Haymitch is with her until the end and holds her hand as she dies. Haymitch ends up winning the games by luring the final tribute to the cliff at the edge of the maze, and he causes her to throw an axe into the force field, which then immediately ricochets back and embeds itself in her skull, winning the game. Collins has an affinity for the female protagonists from the Seam who are in doomed relationships. In case you missed it, the Seam is the poor part of District 12. It's where Katniss grew up. By all accounts, the Seam is the working class section of the district. The main series follows Katniss Everdeen, a girl with an affinity for hunting and gathering thanks to her father. Throughout the majority of Catching Fire, the POV character Cactus is juggling who she loves more, Peeta or Gale. Eventually, this choice is made for her by the end of Mockingjay. In Ballad, the POV character is Coriolanus Snow, who falls in love with Lucy Gray Baird, another girl from the Seam. Eventually, they attempt to kill each other, and she disappears into the wilderness outside District 12 without a trace. So, following this pattern, I think we'll get a new POV romance in Sunrise. To be clear, Haymitch will most likely be the main character of the book, but I believe we may get some more story about how Katniss's mother and father met, or how Katniss's mother and Peeta's father broke up. In addition to this, I think I know how this romance will go down. Towards the end of Hunger Games, Peeta recounts the story of the day he discovers his crush towards Katniss. I guess it was the first day of school. My father pointed you out where, when we were waiting for a lineup, Peeta says, "Your father? Why?" I ask. He said, "See that other girl? I wanted to marry her mother, but she ran off with a coal miner." I can hear your comments now. Wow, that's some tentative evidence, you silly goose. Well, the single quote doesn't contain an entire plot of the book. Shh. You're wrong, and you're stupid, and you're ugly, just like your mom. Jumping back into Catching Fire, there are valuable hints about Katniss's mother's involvement in the upcoming book. During Chapter 14, Katniss and Chia Pet are watching Haymitch's games. By the time we get to District 12, I'm completely overwhelmed by the sheer amount of children facing certain death. There's a woman, not Effie, calling the names. And then I hear the name, Maisley Donner. "Oh, she was my mother's friend," said Katniss. This informs us that Katniss's mother will most likely be involved in the plot of Sunrise. In particular, I think she will most likely serve as our first time getting a civilian's POV to the games that we have not yet received. As a reminder, the main series gives us the POV of being in the games. Ballad provides us the POV of being a mentor, so Sunrise will most likely allow us to peek into the games from a District 12 citizen's POV, and I think that citizen will be Katniss's mother. During this same chapter, we get the clue that Maisley is familiar with processing plants because she is able to use the readily available poisons to turn her blowgun into a deadly weapon. And you know who else has an affinity for plants and grew up working in an apothecary in District 12? Katniss's mom. Since we've already established that the two are friends, Maisley may have learned a thing or two about extracting useful materials from plants thanks to Katniss's mother. This brings us into our bingo card. So virtually it's going to show up here. I have the physical edition in my hand. So if I'm looking down, it's because I'm reading. So, first thing I would like to talk about is Snow uses Haymitch's victory as a political platform. I think in this book that President Snow is not yet President Snow. I think he's still a game maker at this point. So that is what that first prediction is. Next prediction. Katniss and Lucy Gray are related. I have a feeling that Lucy Gray or someone else who's Cubby is Katniss's like grandmother. So if they're not related by blood, they're going to be related by like familial bond or something like that. Next up, Katniss's mom and Haymitch are foils. So I'm using the literary term foil here in that they are two different characters who deal with things differently, so you can see their different perspectives on it. So I'm using that definition. So I think they're going to be foils. Next up, I think Haymitch is going to cause a stir with capital stylists. I think this because in Hunger Games, Haymitch tells them to not cause any issues for the stylists. So I think he's going to cause issues, and it's going to come back and bite him in the butt. This one's a bit of a stretch, but I do admit I think it'll be funny that Snow poisons Dr. Gall, the lady who got him all this power in the first place. I think he is going to return the favor with poison in her breakfast. I don't know why, I just think that's what's going to happen. Next up, I think there's going to be a point where someone congratulates Haymitch on his victory and gives him like a bottle of vodka or something with the line or something along these lines. "Don't drink it all at once," something like that, or some sort of equivalent to that line will happen. So I think there's going to be some sort of tongue-in-cheek like, hey, Haymitch has got alcohol, and they said don't drink it all at once. Get it? Because he's an alcoholic. That's funny, right? Next, I think a major theme of the book will be control and submission. That one's not really a reach or anything. Suzanne Collins is on the record saying that this book is about implicit control. So that's just me just being like, just putting down what the author said. That's a safe bet, I think. Next up, we have POV of being a citizen during the games, as mentioned earlier.
I think we're gonna get the POV of from Katniss's mom's perspective, and we're gonna watch her watching the games, so she can watch her best friend die, and it's gonna be real heartbreaking, but it's gonna be a good plot moment. Next up, Katniss's mom POV. I think we're just gonna have her as a POV character in this book. Honestly, it'll be Haymitch and her. I think we might get a split perspective for once, which will be an interesting new take on the book series. Next up, tangentially related to another one, Tigress gets hurt, or her dress slash gown is ruined by Haymitch. Again, I think specifically when Haymitch causes a stir with his capital stylus, it's going to hurt Tigress in some way. And that's going to be why she no longer participates in the games come the time Katniss and Peeta get around into the 74th. I think we're going to get a slice of life in District 12, similar to how the ballad ended. I think we'll have a slice of life of like things are normal, things are great, and then it's going to hit the fan and we'll find out what happens with Haymitch. I think this book is going to be a perspective study on how the citizens view the Hunger Games and how being actually in the games is. And we're going to see the nice dichotomy. And I think this is where that split narrative is going to come in. We're going to have what Katniss's mom sees and what Haymitch sees, and how these two things don't mesh together that well, right? As my free spot, Haymitch gets reaped in the 50th Hunger Games. We know that's going to happen, duh. Next, I have for a theme depression and coping with it. And in particular, I think it'll have to do with Katniss and Haymitch's mom, or not Haymitch's mom, Katniss's mom and Haymitch, and how they both deal with depression differently. How Katniss's mom shuts down and Haymitch drowns his sorrows in a bottle. So I think there's going to be an interesting dichotomy between those two. Um, Next up, Katniss's mom breaks up with Peeta's dad. As mentioned earlier, I believe Katniss's mom and Peeta's dad will be dating at the beginning, and then something's going to happen, and they're going to break up. And that's going to be our background story of, oh, I was going to marry that girl one day, then she ran away with a minor. In particular, I don't think we're going to get too much of a POV on Katniss's dad because he's not that important to the series, but we will definitely get more POV work on Katniss's mom. We'll get Katniss's mom revealed. Speaking of, next thing on my list is Katniss's mom. We'll know what she looks like. We'll know what her name is. We already know what she looks like. Um, Haymitch dislikes alcohol. I think it'll be a fun, ironic thing that he actually disliked it in the beginning of the book, and then by the end, he's a chronic alcoholic. Next up, Snow tries to sell Haymitch like Finnick, and Haymitch foils the plan somehow. I think the way that he foils the plan is by having his family's dead already. So, like, what's Snow gonna do to him? You're gonna kill me? Like, okay, kill me. I don't care. And Snow's gonna be like, nah, 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 we ain't doing that. Haymitch's family dies to poison. We know that Snow's going to kill Haymitch's family at some point, and I think in particular it's going to be the cause of poison. I think last act in the book, Haymitch is going to be so depressed he's going to look around his house and he's going to see a bottle of vodka, and it's going to be that same bottle of vodka that someone gave to him and said, "Don't drink it all at once." And Haymitch is going to pop that puppy open and glug 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 that thing till the end. Next up, 50th Hunger Games is the first time they have a proper tribute parade, and I think that's why that Haymitch is going to be able to get away with so much is because it's the first time they've done it, and he's going to cause a lot of issues in the way. Next up, we're going to get the POV of being a mentor in the Hunger Games. So I think in the third act of this book, we will have Haymitch function as a mentor, and we'll see him trying to help, like, probably the 51st or 52nd Hunger Games crew survive, and how poorly that goes for him. I think at this point, Snow is going to be a game maker and then eventually become president shortly after. That's why I have Snow uses Haymitch's victory and Snow is a game maker. So he's going to start as a game maker and he's going to use that as a platform to run on so that he can become president of Panem. So I think there's going to be that shift of power in the book. Next up, Haymitch is going to derail his interview with Flickerman because we only got like one line from his interview, and that seems incredibly weird. So I think they're going to expand upon that scene, and he's going to do something really heinous that Katniss and Peeta weren't allowed to see. And last but not least, Maisley's last name is Donner, So I am convinced that Maisley is going to do a cannibalism while in the arena. So I'm curious to see if how and when she eats someone. I'm going to assume it's going to be that everything's poisonous, and the only thing not poisonous that she knows for a fact are people. So she's going to do a cannibalism before she meets Haymitch. I'm convinced that's going to happen. So, with that in mind, you can look at my bingo card, read it, enjoy it, leave a comment, tell me how bad I am. Hit all those funny buttons at the bottom of the video to help, get this video out to as many people as possible. And thanks for everything. Bye.